Well, the Rwanda plan has only been unveiled for about 24 hours so far, and it's already falling to pieces. Not only has Rishi Sunak meant to have, or at least James Cleverly and Rishi Sunak meant to have retooled this so that, it can pass muster, so that, the evil European court won't strike it down when it was actually, struck down by UK judges in the UK High Court. But we've also had Rwanda come out and say it doesn't want any part of this plan if it is going to break international law. Because one of the things that has been going on in the background while we've been discussing the illegality of all this is that this has actually drawn a lot of attention to the Rwandan government and the stuff that they've been getting up to quite a lot with how they've treated refugees in the past. And it's quite embarrassing for them. Not only that, but their own populace isn't too happy with this plan. And not only this, but even red wall Tories, like the people who this is meant to sort of pacify in the Tory party, meant to sort of calm down at least and maybe get them on board to, vote for other stuff as well. They're not too happy about this either. Robert Jerrick quit in a very dramatic fashion just in the late hours of yesterday as well. And as News Stump reported, probably quit because, he didn't get to fire immigrants out of a cannon, which, to be honest, even though it's a News Stump article, I could honestly believe him resigning on that very thing. Obviously, Suella Braverman also flounced out in a very dramatic fashion in her own MP resignation speech, questioning Rishi Sunak's leadership, but I don't think it had the desired effect that she wanted. But nevertheless, she obviously still has a lot of supporters. And of course, it was done to say, hey, wouldn't I make a fantastic leader? Not only that, we are now looking at these red wall Tory voters who have come out and said, yeah, this doesn't, quote, address our fears on immigration. And here's the thing. I've said this every single time we cover this. If you listen to people talking about immigration or the problems about immigration, it's never immigration that's the problem. It's the fact that it is a lack of housing, a lack of investment into sort of these areas, the fact that the Tories promised to level up and it didn't, the idea that there was all this stuff promised around Brexit that it was meant to deliver for these areas, and of course they haven't delivered on these on these promises. Almost everything you can point to for people complaining about immigration is a different problem that has nothing to do with immigration. Like 90% of the time, it's nothing to do with immigration. But we're going to see some of that today because someone's gone and actually talked to red wall Tory voters and say, hey, what do you think to the Rwanda plan? And turns out not, shall we say, winning too many votes in the red wall. Somewhere, well, there's going to be a lot of upset Tories in the coming weeks over this. So before we go diving more into this and see what shall we say have been reported from these Tory red wall voters, what they've had to say on this. Please do remember to click on the like, share, and of course the subscribe button. And of course down below there's the let me put my teeth back in. Of course, there's the Pony Club. There is, of course, the Patreon as well. And of course, there's the YouTube thank you button. And of course, there's the Buy Me Coffee link as well, where you can buy me coffee. So let's crack on into this then, shall we? This comes from the Eye, the title of The Rwanda Plan Won't Work or Address Our Migration Fears, Say Red Wall Tory Voters. And every single time, you do not see these comments, or at least the realities of what these people are expressing, has nothing to do with immigration. It is very often other things that are a problem, and that's why it tends to be. So let's get into this. So red wall Tory voters do not believe the Rishi Sunak's flagship Rwanda asylum policy can succeed and have disagreed with its core principle of no return to the UK, according to focus group research. So these views come from a cross-section of voters of Walsall and West Midlands who all backed the Conservatives at the 2019 general election and voted leave in the EU referendum. They have expressed numerous concerns around immigration, including a sense that asylum seekers, quote, jump the queue for housing benefits and may be associated with higher crime and put a strain on local services. So let's address those things first. First of all, the idea that asylum seekers, quote, jump the queue. There has never, ever been any evidence that asylum seekers jump the queue when it comes to housing or even housing and benefits. There has never been any evidence that these right-wing lunatics put forward. It's just put forward because that's how people feel. That's what people, quote, see, and they get sort of angry and they get sort of emotional about it. But there's no actual evidence for it. Sure, they might see that on the surface, but the reality is very, very different. Because this comes to the whole Schrodinger's immigrant thing of, these asylum seekers or these, migrants that are also taking our benefits, but also simultaneously taking our jobs as well. And one of the things when it comes to sort of housing and benefits is that housing, well, we're in a housing crisis. And I've said before, it's more accurate to describe it as a housing disaster because the government just has not built the social housing it needs or even the right type of housing it needs for us to really help solve this crisis. As for the benefits, well, the benefit system has been a mess for years. And it was the Tories who messed about with the benefit system, which once again caused it to be such a disaster. I again, nothing to do with immigration. Higher crime. You look at areas where these higher crime figures are. Is it being caused by immigrants? No. Shockingly enough, it's people who are here in the UK commit more crime than immigrants do. But again, it's something the right loves to bang on about. Oh, the reason why you've got high crime in your area, nothing to do with, decades, over a decade's worth of cuts to police and services, which would help to, lower these crime rates. No, it's just, the immigrants, they're responsible somehow for all this crime. And then, of course, a strain on local services. People have been feeling the pinch for local services for years. Once again, nothing to do with immigration. That's all down to austerity. We've just done a video just this afternoon about councils having to deal with over a decade's worth of austerity and the fact that you've got inflation, which is causing them to, you know, which is causing them to go bankrupt. Again, that's austerity, not immigration. So every single time, always comes to these arguments of, immigrants are a problem, and I see this. It's not immigrants that are the problem. It's something completely else. It's just that, good scapegoat. It's a good scapegoat for people to blame. And I I said this, I don't know how many times as an issue, as an issue. But that's the truth. And I think it's really more politicians need to start coming out and saying, especially Labour, Lib Dems, and etc., just come out and saying, well, no, it's not immigration that's the problem, it's actually this, and start really explaining it to people. But we haven't had that, unfortunately. But anyway, we'll continue. So, however, their views on the Rwanda scheme suggest that this week's reboot of this controversial policy may not provide much help for the Conservatives hoping to improve their chances in the Red Wall seats. And certainly, those Red Wall Tories, they absolutely were hoping this would improve their chances. Like I say, come election time or the couple of days after the election, oh boy, are we going to see these Red Wall Tories start throwing around accusations left, right, and centre at not only Rishi Sunak, but other people in the Conservative Party. Oh boy, I cannot wait. Anyway, Let's continue on. So there was very little confidence among the Warsaw voters that the Rwanda policy would actually address their immigration concerns. During the focus group run by More in Common think tank that was sat in it on last week, they believed that most of it was doomed to fail, saying, "I really can't imagine it would be successful," said one participant. "I really can't imagine it's something we do. It's kind of like the thing we would say, but I do believe that we're a soft touch. I think it's more something we would say and not do." Another said, "I can't actually get the idea up and running and put it into practice at the moment. So it's just not looking promising." There was also a sense among the participants, including an NHS worker, a former soldier, and a logistics worker, and a small business owner, that any scheme sending people to Rwanda should not be a blanket policy. And yet, we're told by the Tory Red Wall voters this policy is what people want. This is what people want to see. Again, this is what I've said time and time and time again. This is an ideology that these people are following, and they are of this belief that their ideology is true and correct, and that if anything fails, it's not their ideology, it's not their ideas, it's something else. So they double down and they double down on it again and again and again. It's not the idea that the Rwanda policy is illegal and sort of breaking international law. It's clearly, oh, it's just, something else, to the point where we've now got Rwanda turning around and going, yeah, this whole scheme seems to break international law. We might not want to be a part of it. Anyway, one woman said that it depended on who the migrants were. "Because I feel really sorry for some people, but not so for others. Their views could spell trouble for Tory attempts to try and hang on to its 2019 gains, and most of those in the focus groups will be in the new Wilsaw seat at the next election, following these boundary changes, which it will be likely be crucial in any Labour comeback. The old Wilsall North seat had returned to the Labour MP in every election between its formation in 1955 to 2017. But in 2019, the Conservatives won a majority of nearly 12,000. The More in Common director, Luke Tyler, who was conducting the focus group, gave the participants a short factual explanation of the operation of the Rwanda scheme, which was designed to offer no right to return to the UK, even for asylum seekers found to be legitimate refugees after processing, that even if they had arrived on small boats and been sent to Rwanda. So this is also the other thing you see as well. Not enough people, I think, go out and properly explain like the Rwanda plan, the idea that even if you are a legitimate asylum seeker, you've got no right to return. The second you get sent to Rwanda, even if your application is a genuine one, which, by the way, most asylum seekers who come here, the vast majority of them are legitimate asylum seekers. Yeah, you have no right to return. So then what do you do? you know? But on Monday, the government did suggest that there might be some returns in exceptional circumstances, but the general approach was rejected by those in the focus group. He said he couldn't do that, one said. You couldn't have an interpreter who's worked with the British Army in Afghanistan for 5 years and who's escaped the Taliban. Rishi Sunak's got to reckon with that. This is something that we don't mention, and this is something I do want to make a video about at some point in the future. You had a lot of people that from Afghanistan that saw the chaos was going on and knew that they couldn't escape through the Kabul airport. So they hightailed it to Pakistan. There have been a lot of refugees waiting in Pakistan to try and escape, but their visas have now run out because the British government just doesn't want to process them or whatever, or just can't take them for whatever reason, even though we've said, yes, we would take these people. And now these people in these countries who fled to Pakistan to escape from the Taliban are being deported by Pakistan, even though they are legitimate asylum seekers, in many cases, as what this army officer, I'm guessing, has said here, worked with the British Army in Afghanistan. Now what? Instead of fleeing to Kabul, he fled to Pakistan because he knew he could probably, at least maybe his family would be safer, and then they could go from Pakistan to the UK from there. That's not been the case. Pakistan is now deporting these people back into the welcoming arms of the Taliban. This, as I've said multiple times, should be an absolute international condemnation of this. This is what the current government is doing. I think this needs to be brought up, to be honest, in the House of Commons. Someone should really take this to Rishi Sunak and say, you are letting down people who helped us and who put themselves at risk and are now being deported back into the welcoming arms of the Taliban. That is a terrible stain on the British reputation for anything. Because what if we get into the situation again where we need interpreters or people to work with us in another foreign situation? Well, they're going to look back at this and think, well, that's how those Afghanistan people got treated. Why should I go and work with the British Army? Just a thought, maybe, you know. Anyway, it continues. So, while the group did universally agree that immigration to the UK was too high, attitudes were almost universally positive towards people who came to the UK to work, especially if it was for the NHS or social work, which, by the way, most people do. Most people do. They come to work. We have a big shortage and a big skills gap in the UK that needs filling. Even if we were to put a ton of money to upskill people in the UK, it would take years, if not decades, to actually achieve that. So you need to bring in foreign workers. If you want to grow the economy, you need migrants. And guess what? Most migrants, even asylum seekers, they come here to work. And yet, as we've already said, you can point out, you can see numerous studies of this, that they put more into the system than they actually take out of it. And yet, anyone from the right would flip out and say, no, that's not true at all. But there's numerous studies that say that it is. Anyway, one participant said that their preference would be that the UK trained people to work in those professions, but he did held out little hope that this would happen, and so accepted that immigration as a better alternative than leaving skilled roles unfulfilled. Yeah, you can train people for those professions, but then is it a profession they want to go in? Is there, do they see it sort of a future in this work? It's really hard to get people into these things, especially in social work, and caring for old people. If you go to a 16-year-old, do you want to pursue this profession? Ultimately, no. I don't think that's probably their number one profession they would probably want to go in. And it's really difficult to get that into those professions. We've just got to admit that it's a really difficult profession for people who want to sort of go into initially, and those people who are in are really valued and they are skilled workers. But that's just the reality, unfortunately. Anyway, it continues, and this is what that guy had to say. He said, "We're struggling to recruit social workers because people do not want to get into that profession." She said, "We're struggling to recruit all different types of people. I work in social housing. We have a struggle to get builders on the books now, tradespeople. It's really hard to recruit. You need migrants. If you want to grow the economy, you need migrants. You cannot, you know, say you want to grow an economy and then not invest in your economy, and then say, well, actually, we're going to stop as many migrants coming here as possible." Again, it just goes to show you why focusing on immigration is such a bad idea. People get so heated up about it, but the reality is, it's not the root of the UK's problems. The root of the UK's problems ultimately has been the Tory party and, of course, austerity. Those primarily austerity. But yeah, and people are, I think, really now starting to catch on, especially now they're out of the EU, because, of course, they used to blame the EU for a lot of these problems. They used to blame, oh, it's all that, open immigration. That's been closed off for a while. And yet now we're seeing huge problems in trying to recruit. We're still trying to a really hard problem trying to recruit people into logistics sector as well to be lorry drivers. That is another really hard sector where people are struggling to recruit as well. You know, if you can't move your goods about in the UK, that's a big problem for your economy. They continued and said, I think we should probably be investing in people, more on training and whatever. But at the minute, I don't think that is going to change. This was also bad news for Suella Braverman from the focus group, with no one offering a positive description of the former Home Secretary. Some had never even heard of her. That's not surprising. That's not surprising, to be honest. While one said that she seemed to be more keen on speaking to the press than doing her job. Yep, I agree with that. She's just not in touch with what's going on the day-to-day for people on low incomes, and even people that are not on low incomes that are starting to struggle, said one woman. Another said that she's like another said that she's something like that with people like sleeping in a tent, or that they make themselves homeless so that they can live in a tent. And I mean, that's ridiculous. I think, it was really just, it was a really bad statement. And of course, there was no obvious appetite for a return of Boris Johnson. When asked by Tyrrell if they wanted the former prime minister back, their exclamations of no, no one deterred. The consensus among this group for Conservatives and Leave voters was one on one level reassuring for at least Rishi Sunak, but on the other, quite damning. The good news was that some of the voters did feel that the economy was getting better. One noted happily that his energy bill had gone down for the first time in I don't know how long, while others said they didn't mind him, or he was the best of a bad bunch. However, they added that he was out of touch and felt that he was too rich to understand ordinary people, especially during a cost of living crisis. Perhaps most disturbingly for Mr. Sunak, though, was that none of these Tory voters expected him to still be in number 10 after the next election. And so few of them were at all impressed with the cut to the national insurance announced at the autumn statement, almost which of them had barely heard of it before that focus group. It's still a taxing party. The Conservatives, even if they like to advertise themselves as not, and they are all on hidden taxes too, said one said. You always end up paying for it again just later on. So all in all, this focus group spells a lot of bad news. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the coming weeks or even months we start to see more focus groups in the red wall saying he's not really doing good. And this whole idea that, Rishi Sunak's, quote, the best of the bad bunch, well, he's really not doing that well. I would have also loved to have seen if they'd played that infamous clip of Rishi Sunak in the garden saying, well, I took money from sort of poor areas and gave it to the richer areas. It'd be very interesting to see how their reaction would be to that clip. And as I've said before, if Labour do not play that on like a loop just constantly throughout the election, or at least every single Labour candidate out there should be asking that of their Conservative incumbent or potential incomer. What do you think to that? What do you think to that fact that this guy who's your prime minister took money from these poor areas and gave it to the more richer, affluent ones? Yeah, I don't think that's going to fly very well in the red wall, especially when you can even bring up the fact of the levelling up white paper. And I've said this before, give credit where credit's due. The first two chapters get everything 100% right about the lack of investment, the need for an industrial strategy, the need for actual proper investment into these areas. It even said we need this amount of money. Then you get to the Treasury section and it's barely a drop in the bucket, barely a drop of what was needed and labeled out for the first two chapters. And that was Rishi Sunak. That was his pledge to level up. When he was given the opportunity, he didn't put the money into it. There's so much Labour can throw at any red wall Tory, or even sort of, potential Tory opponent, which they can throw at them, and they just will not have a comeback to it. And I think it's more and more getting out there what's going on, because you are seeing, like, it's kind of shocking the fact that you've got people who don't know who Suella Braverman is, but then again, there's a lot of people out there who really do not follow politics, especially when it comes to sort of, explain the Rwanda plan, what it actually is, what it actually does. You're seeing more and more people, oh, actually, that's a really bad idea when you think about it, when it gets explained to people what it actually means and what's in the plan as well. This is why Rwanda's turning around and going, yeah, if it breaks international law, yeah, we don't want to be part of it. you know? It wouldn't surprise me if we start to see more of these focus groups. Would not surprise me at all. But the other thing that I want to point out, as I pointed out at the beginning, whenever you see people talking about immigration, as we saw in that opening, what was it? The idea of, jumping the queue, housing benefits itself, crime, local services. That's got nothing to do with immigration. Got nothing to do with immigration at all. That's down to austerity. It's down to 13 years of Tory rule, mismanagement, and general just economic disaster that they have been responsible for. And that's where I think Labour really need to start coming out. You need to start, I think Labour MPs really start to come out and really start to explain it to people. Because I'll tell you what, more and more people I think you are seeing being turned off by politics, and especially because of the antics of recent years, and because people disengage because they don't understand what's going on, or maybe because they only have like one source of news. They need to be, told, actually, this is what's going on. This is what this plan is. This is what this means. And that's where they really, really need to, I think, to pick it up, because the big question really is, how do you get people who have disassociated from politics to start paying attention again? And more importantly, how then do you get them to the polls? The hope is that once they're re-engaged in politics, they will realize and then go off and do that. The other big thing that we saw recently, Hull. Hull has massively disengaged with politics. But ironically, it's one of these areas where it voted Leave, voted heavily in 2019 for Boris Johnson. Even the by-election, the by-election that they just had after the 2019 general election, and Labour's like, oh, we'll show how big a fluke 2019 was. No, they won it. They even had a big, like, inflatable Boris Johnson. And yet almost immediately in the first week after, after that Tory MP had been elected for Hull, she was out speaking against Boris Johnson. But yeah, these areas, when they are, especially that whole area, that West Yorkshire, very, very worrying that they're below 50%. Very worrying indeed. You need people to be actively and engaged in politics. We need to sort of really think about how we do that and keep people engaged. But as always, that's the eternal, infinite question, of course, in politics. But of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, there are links down below. Leave a comment down below to see what you think. Do you live in Hull? Are you politically disengaged? Do you, what do you think? Like I say, one of them was, oh, we need a British version of Trump, which I completely disagree with, given the fact what you've seen in America on that subject. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.